individual might be suspicious behavior, getting activity, larger disturbances, and any other crimes of the safety of the property. It's reasonable to say and it's correct.
You know, when talking about Imam Shamyl and these Caucasus wars, Caucasus conflicts, it's really important for us to place the man in his time and place, right?
Yeah. So the time is 19th century, early 19th century, and the place is the desert planet of Arrakis.
Which is the home to the geriatric spice melange.
Who knew the history could be so colorful?
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. Haunted by the horrors of the sandworm, this ginormous creature, the size of mountains, right, that will consume everything in its path.
It's been known to do that. Right, I didn't realize that so much of the Silk Road trade was threatened by Shai Hulud.
Yeah, it's a little known fact that I don't think is often appreciated. You know, man and nature will war as per usual, whether it's an emu or a sandworm.
Right, but I don't think they talk about the sandworm until we're jumping ahead. Of course, I think we're gonna get that in part 2.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to Pleasant Evenings Book Club. This is the book club portion of the Pleasant Evenings, where I think we're doing a first 3-parter.
That seems to be what the text is demanding. Yeah, so it's going to be a 3-parter of Sabres of Paradise by Leslie Blanch.
Yeah, now this is a writer I honestly had no idea existed until you introduced her to me.
She seems pretty. I enjoy her kind of interpersonal take on history.
Yeah, she's very thorough, but conversational, just in a way that comes from what feels like deep knowledge. Like, this is someone who clearly cares a lot about the East. Like, maybe I'm gonna say the East because there is a kind of an Orientalist flavor to a lot of this, but it's a nuanced one.
I mean, that whole thing unpacks so much, right? Or demands us to, which I guess is what Leslie is trying to do here, I think.
Yeah, in a way, is a really great text for our kind of critical appreciation of, I don't know, the encounter between East and West, because this is a story of a very brutal encounter between Russia and this area,
Eastern Islamic West mountaineers.
Yeah, it's odd. Something I was thinking, she definitely calls them Easterners, calls the people there Oriental, but this area in the Caucasus, Dagestan, which is in now modern day Russia as a sort of independent republic. She makes sure to place them within the context of the Islamic world, but also makes sure to give you a very contrasting view of what life is like in the owls in the mountains versus in the
palaces of Persia, or places of the Ottoman Empire, which are better off.
Yeah, there's something, and this explains part of what makes Dagestan, or the Avars, these Caucasian mountain people, so exciting. Is there something I'm saying inherently, but I'm grain of salt. I'm more talking about the way that people see them than I am about who they are intrinsically. But at least in the colonial imagination of these big empires, it's kind of and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but it's kind of a frontier for everyone. It's at the end, it's at the very tips of the Russian frontiers, very recent acquisition, not based on conquest until what we'll get to later, until this 30-year occupation plays out. It was something they won from Persia, who themselves had a very loose grip on this area. It's like these passes are of very strategic importance because of the communication between all these other empires, the the Mongolian Empire, the empires in Europe, Russia, Persia, Ottoman Empire. But it's kind of at the fringes of everything just because of its remoteness. So it maintains this kind of like exoticism, no matter from what perspective you're looking at, except of course from their own, which is
there's this romantic sense of freedom that could be very much contrasted with this at this point. This
great game, right? This
rather posh and pretentious Versailles-inspired court life that a lot of European emperors or empires are trying to push on.
Yeah. And she definitely, Leslie Blanch, like definitely, like she's leaning into what she admires, what she finds fascinating about it, and she's kind of identifying it in the lives of these courtiers and noblemen. Like I'm glad that we had read, I guess, two things, right? We read V, which is a different kind of outskirts of the Russian Empire, the recently or of the complexly incorporated Ukrainian area of the Russian Empire, who do get a moment, right, in this book.
Right.
And of Uncle Vanya, like talking about like this kind of anemic, depressed, aimless existence that a lot of these noble people have. That when they go out into the Caucasus, they feel rejuvenated and like filled with that kind of romance. Like one of the first things that Leslie Blanch talks about when talking about the area is talking about the sort of resorts or cities that the noble people, the aristocrats from Russia, from the empire, go to see like these fascinating wild men, the imagining being swept away by them, or like Pushkin's visits to what's this place called, Kazava, whatever. I'm not gonna get these names. It's gonna be a lot of like, nah, remember what's this called?
Yeah.
Kazkava, something like that.
Kazavad Khan or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
I mean, even Lev Tolstoy
Yeah.
made his way over here for a time as a means of escape.
She mentions writers like Tolstoy, Pushkin, Gogol. Even when I was reading the book, I was like, I'm going to be so smart for breaking up Gogol. And then, of course, she brings it up. I was talking about the frontier thing. And then she happens to bring up how the outposts set up by the Cossacks resembled the outposts in the American frontier. I was like, that was going to be my other thing, the comparison to the Westerns. And she just, of course, she sees it all. She's incredibly well...
No, I mean, she's...
insightful.
She's on it.
Yeah.
She does a pretty decent job of remaining fairly unbiased as well.
I think like most of her sources were from Russian dispatches. Like she quotes like any literary figure that touches this area, including it's on my little cheat sheet here. Oh wait, no, yeah, I do have him here. Griboyedov, who wrote some kind of like satire of the like anyone who put a pen, at least she seems to have like absorbed, but because it's mostly Russian sources, she does like tackle these sources with a kind of suspicion and sarcasm sometimes.
Yeah, I think she did have the opportunity to like interview the descendants of Shamyl or Haji Murat.
Mm-hmm. Right, and she was able to like double check that against memoirs that were written.
Yeah, I recall it as a methodology, which is great.
I'm remembering some sections where she talks about how silly it was, the way that the writers would talk about the ideal man and the ideal woman. Especially when it comes to like gender relations, she seems a lot more critical. But then she'll have, and I guess it's for her literary goals, because it's not quite like we were saying before. Like it's not quite a history book. She's trying to tell a story and immerse you in a world. I got so taken aback when she was writing about the Persian court, and she's talking about how the Oriental, in scare quote, the Oriental will admire jewels like all day long. Like that's their pastime, is just to look at a shiny thing. And there's something about their constitution that is drawn to that to jewelry. But I wonder if it's with a kind of irony, because she also says that like,
Well, she mentions the Americans and their cars.
yeah, like they like their jewels just like British people love their pets and Americans love their cars.
Yeah, that's what British people loved, their pets.
So everyone gets a little bit of that treatment. She talks about how extreme the Russians were. There's some kind of eye-rolling stuff about how the Russians are a mix between whatever, like Western diligence and Eastern despotism.
Yeah, which is how to say it. I guess it kind of takes apart this entire East versus West divide, because a lot of these other European powers views Russia in this unfavorable light for being Asiatic.
Yeah. Like, yeah, there's always like this kind of like, you're not really one of us, but you happen to be so strong that we let you play at the table with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It does kind of, and like the way that these narratives, like, they're not, like I'm talking about them like, oh, eye rolling or whatever, and there's reality that this comes out of, and I'm pulling this from the little bit of Edward Said's Orientalism that I read. There's a reality that it comes from, and then there's just the other side of it, in that these narratives then influence reality and like impose a kind of understanding that has real life effects, isn't just an illusion on top, but is a kind of ongoing conversation with reality.
Well said.
Yeah, it's still yeah. My only bits of insight is going to be when I remember what someone smarter than me said. Actually, do check out Orientalism
From Said.
Yeah, maybe we'll see if we do it for an episode. Although, like, I'm already nervous enough doing this book, like doing straight up just like a text. I'm gonna be so afraid of like misrepresenting these points of views and stuff.
No, we want to be misrepresenting. We'd be giving our take on it.
That's right. Yeah, our honest reaction, and yeah, that's the point of this stuff. Like, I know I'm gonna get the details wrong. Like, I wasn't entirely sure what made Hamzat Beg like such a bad guy. And so I guess like when he like took the throne and got comfortable, it showed that he wasn't as into the Murid spirit as the rest of them. I know that he was kind of Weasley before he came on, but he took got a significant win for, I don't know.
Well, so I think he was willing to be loyal to Russia.
Oh, before he became Imam, right?
Yeah, he was convinced to join the Murids as a way of revenge.
Cause he wanted revenge against the Queen of Avaria.
Yeah. Yep.
For some reason, dense tangle of grudges.
Right. I mean, and grudges in this region are full-on generational blood feuds.
Mm-hmm.
According to this source, would wipe out entire families. It could be over some of the smallest, I don't know about smallest, but, over issues of honor.
Yeah. Which led to some of the, like, whenever any opportunity to point out the more colorful details. Apparently, it could get so bad, the loss of progeny, that some villages in this region would have a sort of social mores where a woman could go out in the street covering their head, and anyone passing by could impregnate them without any shame or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been other factors at play if that's the tradition.
Well, just to continue on the family. Well, yeah, yes, that's true.
But that's a way to be like, and it got so bad, and these people are so passionate and honor driven.
Well, I guess if you're losing a blood feud, you'd want to continue on the bloodline somehow. Not that would be the motivation for the widow.
Yeah, she is critical about how a lot of women are sidelined in these Caucasian societies, where it seems like Shamyl's devotion to his wife makes him different from everyone. So if these women who go out to get impregnated, then the whole village would raise those children. So it kind of like erases the woman who's doing this in the first place. Kind of erases her importance in in this past her reproductive ability.
Right. Which, it seems to me that Shamyl might have been against some of that, I think.
Yeah, he did. He was against like the blood feuds, and because like a lot of this section, this first part of the book, does so much to set the tone, establish the setting. But there is a decently sized section once Shamyl takes power after these successions. And do you think we'll ever get to doing this in order, or are we just gonna? Anyways,
No, we can get to doing this in an order for sure.
I wonder. I will see how it goes.
I think we're keeping a decent focus at least.
Yeah. Like this is something that speaking of the literary aspects of the book, this is something that even Leslie does. We're following in her footsteps.
No, I mean that's true. She'll jump around from scenes and years. I mean, there's not necessarily a historical linearity that she's entertaining.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's too soon to hit this tone, but in the spirit. I think like she does it for, I think there's two reasons. Like one is the straightforward thing that she says. She wants to get across a kind of spirit or, kind of principle about these people. And she says like, and to best understand that, it's best to go into a story that happened later. So talking about the in general about the nature of Russian, I don't know, military, like the Russian approach to their soldiers. She'll quote a general who said, "Wherever a dog can go, a soldier can go." And she'll quote that in the beginning, and then we'll get to the scene where that guy actually says it.
Right.
And the story, and I don't know if you want to say it for later, or I don't know, the story where Shamyl beats up his mom.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to happen years from now.
Right. Near the full completion of his unified Avaria, Chechnya, and Dagestan.
Yeah, once he's already like the established lion of Dagestan, and the rebellion is like in the thick, or like right in the middle. Like I think the story is like from 1840s, and the rebellion ended like in the 50s, and it started like I guess in the 20s, 30s.
God, what a long conflict! 3 years.
Yeah. Do you want to tell a story where he beats? Oh, let me go. So the other reason I think so. One is the straightforward thing of like sometimes it is like the best way to communicate the overall spirit instead of just like the progression of chronology is to jump around, tell a story from the future that illustrates, something that she's trying to get across. And the other thing is maybe and let me know if I'm being crazy. It's the fatalism that she talks about too.
Oh.
Everyone's born to live, to fight, to die in whatever way Allah seems to see fit to accept their part. And I think this and it takes on a different thing when it's like, oh, well, could they be victorious? Could they, like, we know this is a failed rebellion of a kind of people that I don't want to say have been erased. Like Dagestan is still there, Chechnya is still there, and they're not happy being Russian all the time. I know they've had conflicts in the 80s and the 90s. Same for Georgia. But there is a kind of flavor, at least in this book, at least like as far as 1960s is concerned. This feeling of like this was like a flame that burned brightly and then was snuffed out too. So you see like all the time, all at once there, which contributes to the fatalism and to the kind of romanticism. The way that it's a frontier, it's also as hauntology, bringing back something we've talked about before.
No, yeah. Well, I mean that's a good take for sure. It could be that method of writing history could be a nice way of kind of navigating the two foci that even Muridism has at this point between Shariat, the law, or Tariqat, the path, right? So in exploring these people, you have to go down these two tensions.
Like what they believed, and yeah. It's really interesting how she talks about like we don't get like we don't get exegesis on the Quran, or we don't, except for like that aspect. She doesn't go too deeply into that, but she does explain that like that level of that hierarchy of understanding And that description of that kind of full devotion, yeah, there's the kind of general wisdom everyone is taught, and then there's the path that you follow if you're a Murid, which is like, I think Murid is like, what is that, like, what does that mean, like disciple, it translates to, something like that?
Yeah, like disciple,
Like
student,
initiate or student, yeah.
initiate is a good one. Well, I recall this quote that's really interesting about like the ultimate realization phrase initiate. Whosoever does not acknowledge that it is immaterial whether he is a Muslim or a Christian has not acknowledged the truth and knows not the essence of being.
And that cuts through. It's interesting to say Christian or Muslim, right? Because this is also an, what do you call it, an intra-faith fight too. Because Russia sees itself as the force that's going to Christianize this area
Of crossover crescent,
right? Yeah,
which was a rhetorical point.
yeah. These little beautiful ways of saying this. Yeah, in a sense, like these religious things are like a focus point for these passions and these spiritually guiding things, but also, yeah, it transcends just those things. Like Sufism is typically a non-violence sector, whatever you want to call Sufism. I meant to
Right.
read more about Islam. I didn't. I'm sorry. um,
It's hard to remain pacifist at a, I guess I'll say legal, at like a legal level when your people are about to be conquered and occupied by this
yeah.
despotic power. So it becomes a choice of this theocracy one
Mhm.
way, or I guess theocracy in another way.
Right. Right. Is that a theocracy or a theocratically justified, I don't know, colonial thing? I'm sure there's. I'm not smart enough to. I kept thinking about the current conflict with Israel and Palestine as we were reading this.
Oh, like some kind of take to gather from it.
Yeah, I kept thinking about yeah, like Israel is like this like Western colonial effort with some, like, obviously like some justification of its existence based on Jewish identity, but mostly just to satisfy Western political ends in the region.
I mean, the entire thing makes me so just pessimistic because, like you said, it's rooted in a good thing, a good idea of a justice for a people that were brutally oppressed, but then it gets mixed up in this awful, horrible colonialism.
Right, but and I'll say, like, okay, so like, if you think, so going back to the Russians thing, like if you think, you know, God is king and salvation for all and all that, then it's so good to spread it in. But obviously, like, genocide in the classical description of the word is trying to erase a way of life, not just killing people in the ways that the Nazis did, but a general erosion of people's ways of living. And then there's the ongoing settlement of, Gaza aside, the West Bank, like those like the violent imposition of settlements. Like, there's something textbook about that. If you want your political power, to your political organization, to claim like a certain tract of land, like one way to go about it is to little by little like set up settlements, kind of like how the Cossacks were instructed to build settlements as they went deeper into the Caucasus.
Right.
Like, as I was reading it, like I was just realizing like how old this playbook is. And like, okay, going outside of, and we can discuss how much of that we leave in. I don't, yeah, going outside of the more of the hot potato that is talking about Israel and Palestine, we just look at the United States and how they formed, or Latin America, which is, I guess, like a little more complicated. No, either way, yeah.
Which I guess is, my issue with Israel. I think, Jewish people deserve some sense of justice. I don't know about a homeland there, but it's marred by this top-down introduction by force.
Yeah, obviously, like their whatever democracy they might have had in their constitution is heavily compromised right now. It seems like the right wing there has a huge grip, and of course
For
it does,
sure.
because
For sure.
how do you not get a right wing hegemony when you're trying to do an ethno state?
Right.
There's only one place where ethnostates end up, which is ethnostate.
Sharia law is kind of scary, though.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to this book, like I wanna, like I wish I could. The Shamyl is a very complicated protagonist for this story because you want to root for his fight for freedom, and at the same time, he seems to have an iron grip over this region.
I mean, there's some cruel punishments.
Yeah.
Like if you show any degree of cowardice, you're what like a pelt is sewn onto your back, and no one is allowed to talk to you.
Yeah, that sounds like a description of like how a cult would operate. No, not to simplify it too much. Not to say that it's just like a very extreme time where very extreme reaction took place.
Right. Which is hard because a fight for freedom, I feel like has got to be a good fight, right?
Man, like yeah, those extreme conflicts, like it's very difficult to suss things out. It's like it's hard to like blame anyone.
I'll blame the British.
That's okay. That's always fair.
I mean, even it's weird. Even here, we have like some British characters bouncing around and fucking about.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because Leslie Blanch is British that she eases up, or if this is the case, but it seemed like they're kind of in the background. I think there's something in the introduction about how Shamyl would send letters to England asking for support, which he thought would have been something England would be happy to do because of their nervousness about Russian encroachment into Asia, and specifically into their colonial holdings in India.
Which is so far away. Like,
Right. Yeah, it'd be a difficult thing to achieve for Russia. We get a little bit of the Russian flavor. Apparently, Paul I literally had plans to invade India somehow.
yeah.
And it's so funny, like talking about like these justifications. Apparently, I saw on the Wikipedia his plan was, in his words, to liberate the Indians, and they would be so grateful that they would happily accept being Russian protectors.
And he was going to share that with Napoleon.
That's pretty funny. You know, there's a conspiracy theory that the British had him assassinated.
No, but that makes sense. I mean, it just seemed like it was barely acceptable. As you know, it was an arrangement of convenience that Russia and Britain were not in all-out war with each other.
Right. That wouldn't happen until the Crimean War, I guess. Like during the Napoleonic Wars, when Russia was flirting with the idea of joining France, things might have gone away. But I guess the British were more concerned with Napoleon. And then I guess like once Napoleon was out of the way, and then they only have, all right, well, what's the chessboard look like now? And Russia's thinking, well, we've been growing at a great rate, and I think we can keep this going. I think all these smaller countries need to take us seriously, including the Ottomans.
Crazy shit.
Yeah, because after Paul died, then Russia was back in the coalition wars against France. Napoleon beat Russia and Prussia. Napoleon was still excited about the idea of friendship with Russia. He made a brief alliance with Russia, but I'm not sure how it fell apart. Eventually, of course, Napoleon would invade Russia, lose terribly, and then Russia and England and other coalition members would invade France and kick him out.
Invading Russia never works out.
Yeah, right. But it was either way, like it was Tsar Alexander who oversaw the deposing of Napoleon.
When also reintroducing the forays into the Caucasus regions.
Yeah.
And then leads us to Tsar Nicholas, and he's a character, isn't he?
Right. When I finally looked up what he looked like, I was surprised because Leslie Blanch talked so much about how handsome and like dashing he is.
I thought he was gonna be hot. Yeah.
Yeah, I was picturing, I don't know, who's hot in an icy kind of way.
I guess Peter the Great, maybe?
Peter the Great, is he hot? Let me look him up.
I don't know. No, not really.
No, this isn't doing it for me. He's kind of cute.
I mean, better looking than
cute.
fucking, rather than Alexander or sorry, Nicholas. Even even Paul I has such a baby face.
Yeah. I only saw one thing. I was looking up pictures of Nicholas II, and he has like a mohawk in one of them.
Really?
Oh, Nicholas the First. Sorry, Nicholas II is later.
I mean, I think Nicholas II is attractive. He's got that dashing look, right?
Yeah, let me look him up. Like, well, the way they talk about Alec. Yeah, no, he's kind of got something going for him.
I mean, it's a handlebar mustache.
Oh yeah, I wanna get my hands around those. I wanna rev that engine, twist on. What am I saying? I can't improv that.
Vroom vroom, motorcycle handlebars.
Well, Nicholas the First, I was picturing. Honestly, I was picturing like Char,
Yeah.
like this kind of like aloof, handsome, super capable.
I think.
But of course, but Nicholas wasn't about scheming or playing games.
No.
He was secure enough I guess in where he was, that his whole thing was just avoiding any kind of liberalism and any kind of challenge to central Russian authority.
He crushed that December protest. Just
right. There was one little murmur of like, maybe we should have a parliamentary system, and then he'd have none of that after that. Was it Nicholas who undid, what's the word? Who dismantled the it seemed like a Russian version of the East India Trading Company. Like there was a company that was trading like Eastern goods with San Francisco.
yes, yeah. He was the one that dismantled it because he was. What was the exact quote? There's no point in having these colonies if I can't like police over them with my direct will.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I guess it's a kind of backlash to that other stuff. I guess also following the huge upheavals that were the Napoleonic Wars, which was Alexander, who was a lot more chill, actually, stuff, but whatever.
That entire dynasty seems rather cursed with the assassination of Paul, though. Like I think it was mentioned that Alexander had a lot of guilt about that.
That might have been why Alexander was so chill, because he knew that if the people in his court didn't like him, he could be next, probably.
Right.
Not that he was exactly so chill. Yeah, but it once that assassination happens, it creates an atmosphere of either I need to be on everyone's good side, or I need to create some kind of situation where they all need to be on my good side.
Right. Everyone needs to be happy. No issues.
Yeah, and I keep calling Alexander chill, but of course it was his. He had sent Yermolov into the Caucasus, who was incredibly effective apparently. And
I mean, he was brutal because he adopted tactics that were ruthless, right? Of just destroying entire villages.
And that very cute justification. It's the only way they can understand. You have to be as ruthless as they are. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Because Leslie Blanch wonders if it was that brutality that made Avarian, Caucasian resistance against Russia so white hot. Like if some colonizing force, like borderline crucifies a bunch of your people, like kills, like razes villages, destroys crops, like ruthlessly like dismantles like a lot of people's like way of life to establish like a military foothold in your backyard while preaching the religion that is not your religion. It seems like a really good way to inspire a theocratic backlash.
Yeah, to a fatalistic degree, right?
Yeah, it is. Who knows, like, what could have stopped it? Who knows what could have made things go a different way?
I mean, there are so many domino pieces, so many cards falling together, right? As early as Catherine the Great, and the conquering of Crimea. We're not conquering, but
This is some conquering.
These expansions and these expansions into Crimea, Georgia. I mean, it was.
That section where Leslie Blanch quotes Pushkin talking about the rate of Russian expansion, how quick it was. It makes it sound like like the unstoppable wave of the future, like the destiny of the Russian people to envelop Europe or something. But it was like
Right.
beautifully written, and it's exhilarating. Not that I believe that Russia should have, Lebensraum or whatever.
But there's some poeticism in how it was put.
Oh, I'm not gonna be able to find this quote. I read it. I read this book mostly on my Kindle, which is really nice to read, but it's not so responsive to like touch through. I'm not. You don't want to like type and move things around, zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah, I've long abandoned my Kindle for my phone reading, which also has a Kindle app.
Yeah, so it's all talking to itself, anyways. I've had my Kindle for less than a year, I think, so I'm still kind of on a honeymoon with it. I do like a bigger display. This episode brought to you by Amazon Kindle. Buy this product from Amazon. Ethically justifiable thing to do.
Yeah, do it for your readings on Sabres of Paradise or Frank Herbert's Dune, which is so just oddly inspired by this.
Besides that, he took the idea of a giant worm devouring mountains. Besides that, he stole that idea straight from the Caucasus campaigns.
I mean, he took entire quotes and just flipped them into his own, which is cool. He did it in a really creative way.
Yeah, I've still got to read Dune. Is the vibe reading Dune as romantic as this one is? Like, how's the vibes compare?
Yeah, it's just as romantic and like this future historical framing of things.
Like the narrations, like kind of omniscient. And
Yeah, I mean,
like
total. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You're the one who's read Dune, so shut up.
There's like this omniscience to it. Maybe not omniscience, but there's like a historical archaeological vibe to this, where we're talking about these events of Dune in the past tense a lot, especially in how we open every chapter, because a certain character is talking about Paul Atreides and Muad'Dib and what his deeds were.
Oh, like it's I get it. Like, yeah, like that kind of like distance of time. Like this is history as it played out. This is part of the tapestry of where we are now, whatever now is.
Right. Which is really cool from like a sci-fi book.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that's kind of detrimental is that I think his goals are to be critical of the hero figure, as though they were a despot in the vein of Tsar Nicholas or
Shamyl.
Right, but I don't think he sells that quite as well.
Like it still ultimately reads as this kind of like power fantasy adventure.
Right. I mean, for me, Paul and the Fremen were fighting a good fight, and this danger of future jihad felt so distant and far away.
I have a feeling that's how this is gonna go for me. I'm gonna cut off like, sure, Allah's path is the only way. Like once you buy into like that worldview, especially where it comes from in its resistance, it's, I guess, a little different because we're talking about humans fighting humans, and I've only seen the Dune movie, but the Harkonnens are like, they look so evil.
Yeah, and I mean they're portrayed very evil in the book as well, which is maybe also detrimental because they are just human too.
But but they look all disgusting, and everything about them is bugs.
Yeah.
So like when you portray people like that, instead of like, and Tolstoy was there too, you know.
Right. It feels a little less nuanced and complicated than the actual historical events.
Yeah. Okay. So do you want the indigenous desert people defending their homeland, or the army of Voldemorts?
Right, and everyone's going to choose the desert people.
Yeah, I'm not gonna both sides them when one of them is like
Truly fucked up, like.
Yeah, when one of them looks like Immortan Joe.
So I mean that's the one weakness of at least the first Dune novel. He does make up for it with the sequel books.
I know I'm gonna come out of this with a huge reading list. I want to read that Tolstoy story about the guy that killed Hamzat Beg.
Yeah, but Haji Murad, I was thinking the same thing. You know, I've never read Tolstoy.
I've only read like The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and in theory, I read Moonlight Sonata, but I don't remember how that goes. The man is jealous. The music is something. Yeah, we should definitely add that to.
Yeah, my major exposure to for sure. My major exposure to Russian reading before this book club was Dostoevsky.
I read like half of Crime and Punishment.
Oh, I finished that. That was kind of interesting. I think it's a little overrated. I do like Notes from Underground or the Idiot.
You went through a Dostoevsky period. It sounds like.
Yeah, I read a few of his works.
Like, what was the main thing you responded to? Like the psychology or?
I liked his existentialism and the manner in which he sold his characters, which I guess is the psychology. They felt very deep to me.
Yeah, deep is a good, like the stuff that they're dealing with, the stuff that like everyone kind of not thinks about, but like maybe doesn't want to face or makes like reconsider your assumptions.
I mean, we're already doing so much. We've really derailed.
Yeah, our. Oh yeah. Do you want to just to get us back into it? Do you want to tell the story of the time that Shamyl showed his excellent leadership by beating up his mom?
Yeah, holy fuck, what a story, right? So, and this is in the middle of the conflict between Imperial Russia and the mountaineer Imamist freedom fighters, where
at this point the Chechens are involved in the struggle as well, even though they're not as invested in Muridism as the Imamate is.
Right, and they got themselves in this horrible, awful position where they're either faced with continuing to fight on and starving to death, or surrender to Russia and face the wrath of a very angry Shamyl.
Yeah. And like the story could have stopped there. Just like the fact that they're like, shit, do we need to ask permission before we surrender? And the option between dying by the Russians or facing whatever Shamyl has planned, if that's already what you're thinking, that says enough about Shamyl's kind of leadership.
Right. But no, it doesn't end there, listeners. So they come up with this idea, right, of how do you approach Shamyl with this concept of surrender to Russia? Because although Shamyl did not like his freedom fighters and his fortresses continuing on these blood feuds, goddamn did he have a blood feud with Russia.
And that's an aspect that I'm excited to get into as we go further in.
For sure.
Once it becomes more personal between Nicholas and Shamyl. Right,
because, I mean, even now there's hints of the tragic fate of Shamyl's son.
Oh, yeah, what's that gonna be? Oh, but anyways.
So the Chechens come up with this idea to approach Shamyl with surrender, and that is to go to his mother, because Shamyl was usually receptive in listening to the woman in his life.
Yeah. His mom and his wife were usually like influences that stayed his hand or that cooled him off a little bit.
He did allow his sister to tear him a new one as well.
That's true.
But that's another story.
Yeah.
So the Chechens representatives ask Shamyl's mother to intercede on their behalf and to approach him with the idea of allowing for surrender in order to save them from starvation. After putting 200, 300 gold pieces towards her in order to make a donation, she not only considers it, but goes ahead and acts on that.
That detail is so weird to me. I don't know how to imagine Shamyl's mom.
Well, she was charitable, right? She was going to give that money to other mountaineers in need, I would imagine.
Right, because like, what is she gonna do with 300 coins? I don't know, 300 pounds of whatever the
I don't know if it's pieces or pounds or
300 units of money.
that's a lot of money in this time and era and place, right? Enough for her to confront her imam's son,
Yeah,
which he listens, right? Because I think comes across that Shamyl is usually a pretty calm listener,
right.
and he does maintain this air of calmness and says, "Okay, I'm gonna go to the mosque to figure this out with Allah and Muhammad," right? And he does this for some hours, and a crowd is waiting outside because this is taking a long time, right? So there's tensions outside.
Yeah, it wasn't like 3 days or
His
something that he was in the mosque.
Yeah, his knives were out there. His Murid fighters waiting for his word as to what is to be done. Finally, he comes out, and it was decided that this wouldn't happen, and whoever first brought the idea of surrender to him was going to receive 100 lashes from the whip. We know who this first person that approached him with surrender was.
His mom.
His poor mother. So his poor mother starts receiving these 100 lashes down to 95 lashes, right?
Yeah, so she gets 5 lashes, then he like cries over her body.
Right,
And
she
he's like,
faints during this process. And
that
so
sounds terrifying.
yeah, it's fucked.
And then he says, Allah in his wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Because like that's the thing about Shamyl is that he's like, as Imam, he's a prophet. Like what they say is that Muhammad is the first prophet and Shamyl is Allah's second prophet. Like
Yes.
his access to God is absolute, or it's the closest thing to holy you could imagine.
It is
Like,
indisputable
for a mortal.
and infallible.
That tells you a lot about like the intensity of which not just that he ruled, but by which people followed him.
Right.
Yeah, but sorry, I'm gonna finish up the story. So he says that he spoke to Allah once again, and
That he is allowed to take the rest of the 95 lashes.
I like the detail where he says to the people that are lashing him, like, if you don't hit me hard enough, I'll kill you. Like, you're gonna be put to death if you don't hit me hard enough.
That was a crazy detail, and it really shows that this. I mean, Shamyl is a pretty tactic mind, right? Because that event, that story accomplishes two things for him. It helps further his Shariat, the practice of the law. It'll keep his mom out of the way from meddling in the future. I think was Leslie's word choices.
Yeah.
And then it also shows the mercy of Allah.
So he's a spiritual leader, a politician, and a martinet, like all at the same time. Because after this, no one thinks about retreating or surrendering ever again. So I imagine the Chechens went back and he's like, so what did he say? I don't know. He beat up his mom and then took 95 lashes and oh, so we just die then, right? Yeah, absolutely.
We're just gonna starve now.
So, or do you imagine he didn't lash his mom, did he?
Oh, he did 5 times.
Oh, I was afraid he'd do that. I'm so sorry. Tell my children I love them. I think also like taking those lashes. Yeah, so Leslie Blanch, it's interesting. She's like, we're talking about that kind of like critical eye. Like, she's not just repeating the legends, but she's trying to analyze them.
Right.
Because I think one thing that she brings up a lot about Shamyl wasn't just his ability to, not just his knowledge of the Quran, of the Sharia, which he came up in a madrasa, which is like a place of learning, like it's a place of monastic seclusion and study. Like, he was a student, right, of Islam before he was a faith leader. But she also emphasized that he had a skill for theatrics. So like she's just
Exactly.
saying
We're
like
getting
he
there.
must have known how this must have come across and known how to use it to his advantage. And it's an interesting kind of wrinkle to sort of great man stuff. Like we're talking about, or I guess I right, we're talking about I like how these narratives are imposed or sometimes self-imposed, like and I think like that applies to like the story that communities tell themselves about who they are, but also to these leaders. I'll going back to early on where she talks about like the sort of like mythic clash between Nicholas and Shamyl. She talks about these mythic stories, these tinsel laid portraits of these people, and she wonders if there's not some tinsel in their like I'm mixing metaphors and I'm not getting the quote exactly, but she's wondering if there's not some tinsel in their metal as well.
Right. As though they were, there's an awareness to the drama and the theatrics.
Yeah, that it so and she gets to like see it all. Like it's you have to be a certain kind of person to captivate people. But part of what being a certain kind of person that captivates people is knowing your angles, so to speak.
Right.
Like being able to captivate people is a skill. You know, it's like an Odysseus playing the lute kind of thing. Like it's part of what glamour splendor is.
It's a rhetoric of motives.
How do you mean?
So rhetoric of motives is this work from Kenneth Burke, who was a rhetorical theorist, and he makes the comparison of rhetoric and persuasive acts as one that is very directly compared to theater.
So like the way that actors might say like, what's my motivation?
Right.
Like a kind of awareness of these kinds of narratives, and I guess like a simple thing would be like asking like, why would I lie to you?
I guess so. The actual theory itself is more accurately called dramatism.
I found the quote, by the way. Let me. Oh, what did you? Oh, I see it here. It's kind of gestalt of the sort of the setting of where people are placed, the actions they take, and awareness of the actions they're able to take, their effects, and how they come across. I found a section here in Leslie Blanch's words about, I guess is applying to kind of these characters that are affecting history, these historically, these great men, scare quotes. This quality of tinsel, of glittering heroics, invests some of the greatest figures, tyrants, heroes, kings. They appeal to popular imagination and they are represented popularly. But is there not perhaps something basically meretricious or tinseled in their nature too? Are they not a judicious rather than accidental mixture of braggadocio and grandeur? Skipping ahead, the historian Gibbon dwells on the dangerous effects of a conscience that slumbers in a mixed state between self-illusion and voluntary fraud. This whole section is like so beautiful. I could just keep going. I was like, wow.
Exactly.
Obviously, like Gibbon's quote makes it sound like it's a little of the darker side, but it's also just a kind of valid way of communicating, especially in political contexts.
I mean, it's a strong critique, right?
Mm. Yeah, and introducing it so early on makes you wonder. But like the story of the Shamyl, like this idea, especially of self-illusion, is, and I wish I had used a different word rather than illusion. If it is faith, then let it be faith. But he was always that intense. When he was a kid, he threatened to stab himself if it would make his dad stop drinking.
Right.
And like he became imam, but after loyally serving two imams before him. Although, like, I guess it was kind of a muddle around when Hamzat Beg was assassinated. But he served under his friend Kazimullah, who became imam and was the leader of the Caucasian resistance. And it's something that, despite all his intensity, Shamyl didn't take up because his teacher was against violence. So he stuck to the madrasa and he stuck to his learning, and of course to Fatimat. But eventually he joins Kazimola, becomes like his second in command or like his like co general. They, the unfortunate events at Gimri happen where it's kind of like I forgot what the place where the Spartans fought Persia, but it's kind of that story where it's like a bottleneck where they're fighting off the
Thermopylae.
Thermopylae. That was it. It's like that same story. It's like this bottleneck where they're fighting off like these innumerable Russian troops, but there's a goat path that they were able to go down, where that quote I brought up earlier about the dogs, if a dog can go there, a Russian soldier can go.
Yeah.
There's great imagery there. The Russians take the town, like destroy, burn it to the ground, like this town where he and Kazimola had grown up, or at least like had made their home for a while. I'm not 100% on the details. Shamyl barely escapes by jumping over the heads of a bunch of Russian soldiers.
Apparently he was famed for being able to jump, like a 7-foot wall?
Damn. That's that kind of like mythical stuff where like it's really interesting where she will like point at like, oh, it's so crazy, these not crazy, whatever. It's so interesting, these narratives that we build up, and how sometimes she will just repeat the myth and let you like live in the romance of the time, or at least the conception of the time that had been built up.
Just to see and feel the deeds, right?
Yeah. And because especially I'm sure like the people that were following him, that was the stories they would tell. Because they would say like, oh, I heard he was descended from Georgian aristocracy. That he was the son of the prince who
resisted.
Yeah. Anyway, he goes away. He goes away to. So I wasn't able to pull out what that word was, in time for the record, but the owl. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. That's the name of those fortresses. Those.
I think owl is. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, that sounds the most natural to me. But then there's also these smaller huts where Leslie Blanch almost makes it sound appealing. These like tiny rock huts even further up the mountains that aren't even fully covered in, where wind and rain get in easily. There's a corner for fire where cattle dung is burned. Everything that they cook with it has a delicious kind of tart flavor.
It piques my interest.
Yeah, I would go for a weekend. A week. I could do a week. I think.
I mean, I'm a big fan of goat cheese and honey.
The mountains, the mountain air would do so much alone, as long as it's not raining.
Right.
Or if it's not raining, I could.
Or snowing.
Yeah. But he's hiding out there while he heals.
And it was kind of nice because this was a deeply romantic time with him and Fatima too, and that was that was nice.
Yeah, it was tender. I was like, okay, this is like the scene. Like she's telling a story, because it's not just like, and he was devoted to his wife, and it was so, like she's giving you these scenes where you can at least like one thing to hang on to for understanding that they have a deep bond. Because like also like Fatimat's love for him has to be so great, for according to how they depict Caucasian society, like surviving a battle is already like a little suspicious. It's a little like, what do you do? How come you didn't fight to the death?
Yeah, why are you alive?
Yeah, which eventually his sister comes and breaks off this little hamlet, this heterotopia they've built up. She comes and interrupts it. She upsets it so much that his wounds open up again. He has to heal a little bit longer, but she tells him off, and he goes back, and by then we have this other character, Hamzat Beg, who is from that area, but he was looking to defect to Russia before, like you were saying before, he was convinced by this other guy whose name presumably has vowels in it. Uh, and I suspect consonants.
I can try
He's
to
convinced by this guy
find it.
to carry on the resistance against Russia.
Largely for the sake of overthrowing Khmer.
Like this small kingdom that's in Dagestan.
Yes.
Right. It works out. They overthrow her, but he creates a lot of enemies by doing so. I think he kills all
Including.
of her sons and eventually kills her, takes her throne.
So one of the enemies that is made is Haji Murat, which was one of the
Yeah.
adopted sons of a Varian queen.
What's her name? Some Peke?
He,
Bahor Peke, something like that?
Khmer Beke.
That's it.
So Haji Murat is able to avenge her and the sons.
Haji
Oh yeah,
Murad, sorry. Yeah, he's the
yeah.
adopted son
He
of.
was of that queen, Khmer, and is able to quite successfully assassinate
Yeah.
Hazmat Beg. So he's a rather short-lived imam.
Yeah, it's like a few years. He got in his someone else's revenge, but he kind of owned it. Apparently he had some hatred for this Avarian queen eventually.
Yeah. Well, I think he was into the idea of glory for its own sake.
Yeah. This narrative the whole time though, Shamil is happy to not take the spotlight. She says that that the reason why Kazimola and Shamil might have eventually butted heads was simply because Shamil was a better general than Kazimola, not because of any kind of ego stuff. Like he was just committed to his mission or to his understanding of what his duty and for therefore the duty of everyone else ought to be.
Yeah. Although Kazumila had a nice quote that really sums up this Murid review. This world is a carcass, and he who seeks it is a dog.
Oof. That's fine. Yeah, that's badass. I want a t-shirt that says this world is a carcass.
And he who seeks it is a dog.
Yeah, you need both. That's powerful stuff. So yeah, Kazimola, yeah, their disagreements are not in ethos or worldview. Shamil and Kazimola are like I can only imagine they had great conversations.
Yeah. Shamil's disagreement was largely one of just wanting to seek more time, right?
Right. Yeah, he thought they weren't ready. And eventually, I think where we leave off in the fighting is that Russia inflicts great gains against the Murid Kaz. Kazimula dies, Hamzat Beg dies, unrelated, but he dies. And Shamil is like slowly consolidating the Caucasus against Russia. After a pretty bad defeat, they agree on some terms of peace, but we quickly see that it's not to last.
No. These terms of temporary peace are great, right? Because Nicholas is under the impression that this is a long-lasting peace. Like this is a victory, right?
Yeah, that they've done it. They finally quelled this little burp in Russia's devouring of the Caucasus.
So this Nicholas goes all the way from St. Petersburg to what was the capital of Georgia.
So it's Tbilisi, but she says Tiflis in the book.
Tiflis. I think she did say Tbilisi. Tbilisi.
She says Tbilisi at some point, and then
she mentions the George name, but then she reverts back to the Russian
Oh.
naming. And boy, when Tsar Nicholas gets down to Georgia, he is pissed.
Yeah, a great introduction, a great villain introduction. Like as he gets there, he like someone is rude or something, and he demotes them, and that person goes on to kill themselves.
Yeah, it was one of the princes.
So he's going in because all these aristocrats, they love to call themselves princes, and like the Georgians see themselves as like little brothers to Tsar Nicholas, but he arrives and it's clear all are below him and his authority, as godlike as you can get in the semi-secular West.
Yep. He is the policeman of both Europe and the Cross.
Right, the title that he had, that he had self-consciously taken up. Speaking of these great men who know their angles. Yeah, it's a great. This is like I'm so sorry to put this into Gundam terms, but it's like in Double Zeta Gundam when you finally see Haman with an army.
Oh, that's so true.
Or in Zeta, I guess, when she appears, like, oh shit, like things. She's gonna lay down the law. Like we thought we were coasting. It was a hard fought battle before.
She's about to hit the fan now.
But I wonder, like, she's Leslie Blanch is pitching it as this kind of rivalry between these two, unstoppable force and movable object. But Nicholas arrives, and what he does is he deputizes the whatever, I don't know army terms, but the general in charge, the colonel, whatever. He understands that, I'm not going to be able to micromanage it as well as I would like from St. Petersburg.
Right. So he has to delegate.
Yeah. So I wonder how this narrative is going to play out, because I like that it's except in very narrow circumstances, like I guess this one kind of, because it is these two, word is law autocratic figures at opposite sides of a political and theocratic understanding. But in terms of the mechanics of the plot, like how will Nicholas make his presence known?
I guess we gotta read more to find out.
I guess we'll see. I am excited though. This has been a really cool book. I think it's like beautiful, beautifully written and exciting, and like there's like a lot of parts that make you laugh, that make you think.
Maybe parts will make us cry.
Maybe we can start winding down, but I do want to leave some room to talk about just like our like favorite parts. Because one thing we didn't talk about that I knew as soon as I read it, is like I need to bring this up. It moved me the most from just like an aesthetic point of view. I guess I'll just go if you want to like some time to think of your thing, if you want to, or whatever things you want to bring up. But I loved the section with the Cossacks. It's a small section, but especially talking about the bells is really, really interesting. Like I can pull out these thematic things that she's pointing at. That's also where she compares the frontier to the American West, this colonial settler expansion. But she talks about how it's a funny line, like how Russians love bells, a known thing. They put their bells everywhere. But then when I imagine this landscape out of the mountains, kind of separated, these outposts that are spread around, and the sound of these bells connecting them, filling the air with this ringing, it sounds so beautiful. And then Leslie makes I call her Leslie. I don't know. Should I say Blanch? Leslie Blanch. Because I'm already familiar. Like she's already my buddy. Which she brings up how part of what they're doing with the bells is that, as she puts it, like it helps them imagine the many bells of St. Petersburg that these Cossacks probably had never been to and never would be. It's kind of interesting, if we have Shamyl as the kind of figure that gets you as close to God as you can get, and Nicholas is this kind of God Emperor of the tundra. It kind of shows how everything is oriented towards St. Petersburg in this time, like in their political organization, and the kind of glamour that these trappings of empire can have, and like in these ways that something like bells filling the air can have. But at the same time, I think just there's something magical. I love when one of the greatest gifts that the universe can give me is if I'm outside and I don't realize that there's a wind chime, but I do realize the sound. Those moments are like
Pretty
sublime to me.
magical, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the idea of like this like network of bells ringing out just sounds it was just so beautiful to me. So that's I just had to bring it up. I like that stuff.
That reminds me of like as Tsar Nicholas is traveling through Russia, there's this reference to him going through many Russias.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. It was a really it did expand my understanding of the Russian Empire and I guess like Russia today. Like I know that USSR isn't a country; it was a union of Soviet socialist republics.
Well, you know what? I think even at this point,
Hmm.
you kind of mentioned it with Dagestan or Chechnya today as being republics that are fairly independent within the Russian Federation.
Right.
Like, I think that's something that we forget about when talking about Russia is that it is these multiple republics that are federated with
Hmm.
one another.
Yeah, like Russia's so big, it's absurd to think of it as one thing.
There's a pluriessentialism there that is kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. There's something about this story that like in terms of breaking down like the Russian identity, whatever that is, the I don't know, the kind of power of empire and like what it means to be a people. Like this is a really cool story for breaking that down. That's right. The many Russias thing, that's a really good thing to bring up. Plus him traveling also. They got I think that's where the Pushkin.
Quote about speed.
Yeah.
Russians like to go fast because there's so much land mass.
So yeah, so Russians love bells. Russians love go fast. um, like it's silly, but it does open the door for this very inspiring stuff to the spirit, to the imagination.
Definitely. I guess one more thing I want to bring up
Mm-hmm.
it is besides Fatima and Shamil, there are some other cool, um, tender moments between these Eastern Khans and these princesses of the West.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the Khanate city in Crimea, I think had these beautiful fountains and memorials to these lost
Right.
princesses of like Scotland or
Yeah, who fell in love with a Khan who was so devoted to them.
yeah, he built this fountain in her name.
Yeah, and like the way that they imagine these women as also being kind of like the soft side of Christianity too, like introducing love, like their version of love to this region, but like you wouldn't know it from the fountain. Like that's just like the story they tell, but like I don't know, this the way they depict the love is strong on its own. And it's also she describes that world as being one where these passions like left like reverberations, right? Like you can't not feel
Yeah,
melancholia or or inspiration when you're there.
yeah.
Yeah, Leslie Blanch, like, yeah, honestly, a great writer. I don't know why I have to throw in honestly. If I had to admit, she's a great writer. It's just to underline. It's good
She's
stuff.
damn good. I mean,
But
it got us going for a while.
yeah. So on that note, I think I'm sure there's more we can talk about. There's a bunch of like little details, and it's just whatever.
It's a massive work and it's a massive undertaking that we are going to
Yeah.
trying to attempt to podcast this
Right. So next month we're gonna do part two.
next month. Yeah, I mean,
I guess that's how it's. Yeah, we have two monthly podcasts basically.
yeah.
Well, we'll see how it plays out. I'm thinking it's gonna be a three-parter. I
I think it's comfortable enough with how busy
yeah.
life can get.
It's kind of interesting. It's a three-parter where in between each part we're gonna get a one half of Victory Gundam. Hopefully, this will be the Gundam series to to be in conversation with this book.
Yeah, because of the weird reframing that Tomino is doing and contextualizing this with the Russian and Ukrainian war.
Yeah, this was one. I think he said it in Eastern Europe. We'll see. It kind of is working out. Will it be as such or?
Find out next time, listeners. Thank you for listen to part 1 of Sabres of Paradise.
And have a pleasant evening.